Hello, BookTube. Well, it's the 1st of September, a glorious new month that presents to the world a glorious new issue of Open Letters Monthly, the online literary journal of which I am the managing editor. And as usual, the issue has plenty of good stuff to entertain and interest a reader of almost any kind. And in addition, this issue features the debut review by a booktuber. As far as I know, the very first. It's Dalton Gentry from Strip Cover Lit, reviewing a book that we've seen on this channel before, a debut collection of short stories. So, you have extra incentive to go over and read to your heart's content. But the thing I wanted to do this morning is a tag. And it's a very simple tag. It's created by One Book, One Review. It's the Big Books tag. And since I love big books so much, it's a wonder that I've taken this long to get to it. It's actually very simple. It's not a list of questions as tags usually are. Instead, it's just name the 5 biggest books in your collection and then talk about 2 big books that you haven't got to yet. So I went through I went through my shelves looking for great big books, and there are quite a few of them. In fact, I had to leave out whole genres. Alan Moore, for instance, just wrote a huge 1,200-page work of science fiction fantasy, and there are tons and tons of biographies, my favorite genre, that tip the scales over 1,000 pages. I had to leave all of those out. They seemed a little abstruse. I picked 5 big ones instead that are slightly more general interest. The first of which is this. James Boswell's Life of Samuel Johnson, which in this modern library edition with its black and white austere covering is 1,278 pages. You can find them smaller, of course. The whole tricky part of this tag is that different printings make books different lengths. But still, like pornography, we know it when we see it. A very long book announces itself. This is a gigantic biography of Samuel Johnson, and it's downright strange. A famous brontosaurus reviewing it said that it is the first of biographies, and there is no second. Of course, there are hundreds of thousands of seconds. And I'm not even sure that this is the first, because I'm not even sure that it's a biography. But it is marvelous. It is an unending collection of interest. Now, there are many, many abridgments of Boswell that are out there, and they might be the way to go if you're doing him for the first time. And then once you're hooked, you'll go to the unabridged, and then once you've done the unabridged, you'll go to the heavily annotated unabridged so that you can learn more and more about the time and what was going on, because Boswell doesn't explain himself much. And he certainly doesn't explain himself as well as he thinks he does. But I'm assuming that, well, actually no, in the big book tags that I've seen, a lot of the books that are hauled on camera are simply there by virtue of page count, but I can assure you every one of these is also a recommendation, and I do recommend Boswell. How can I not recommend Boswell? Next one is something we've seen on this channel before. It's a gigantic epistolary novel. It's Clarissa by Samuel Richardson, and this is the big Penguin version. This also exists in abridgments, or used to anyway. You can certainly find them in secondhand shops. You won't often find this because it's so self-evidently an undertaking, but it is wonderful, and it builds as it goes along. So it's a sensory experience. It's like walking in a world, and that's what I love about big books that I don't often get in shorter books. I need to go to larger books for that, is that sense that the author has covered everything and has made a world for you to walk around in, rather than showing you a glimpse of that world. But the next 2 things I want to show you specialize in glimpses, because another way that we use big books is to pick and choose, right? We don't. One of the ways that we use very big books, some of them anyway, is to dip in here and there, rather than read straight through from beginning to end. And one of the kind of big books that lends itself to that treatment comes from my very own profession, where people who have written book reviews over the years will then be tempted to collect them. I've often been tempted to collect my own, and might still do it, especially now that self-publishing is such an easy thing. I could make a couple of very hefty volumes without much trouble or expense, And it would be more convenient for readers who might want to put themselves through that. But the two things I have in mind, there's this. The complete collected essays of V.S. Pritchett. There are, in fact, almost no actual essays in this book. They're almost all book reviews and book prefaces that were done on the fly, for money, pre-internet, when Pritchett just had what I had and every other critic had, a typewriter, and right next to that typewriter, a small bookcase full of absolutely essential reference works. Because once upon a time, if you wanted to know when Lord Acton died, you had to have that information at your fingertips in order to put it in your review. And it wasn't on Wikipedia because there was no Wikipedia. It wasn't online. There wasn't anything like that. If you wanted to know what Neville Chamberlain's exact words were when he got off the plane from Munich, you need to have a reference work for that. You can't call up YouTube. And then you synthesize that information, you get it all at your fingertips, and everybody that I've ever known who's in this situation has a different key library, although a lot of the books remain the same. You need a big, reliable quotations book. You need a book of biography, a biographical dictionary, usually Chambers. All these things are gone now because the internet has made them utterly superfluous. But once upon a time, every working critic had that small kernel library that they couldn't do without. And this is the product of that for Pritchett. He had that library. And so somebody would, well, let's pick a random here. Somebody would some editor would say, I need 800 words on Galdos. Can you provide? Of course, if you're a freelance book hack, your answer is yes. But you wouldn't know anything more about, Spanish literature than he would about The Man in the Moon. But he has enough information at his fingertips to get it, and enough talent to make it interesting, which is everything. It's not a question of do you have access to Chambers' biographical dictionary, but it could go into the London Library and get that. It's what you do with it that counts. And this is a collection of a gigantic number of his such pieces, and they're all infinitely readable. And I don't think you would ever go pick this up and just read it from front to back. I don't think even I've done that. You instead would read it, as I always say, backwards, forward. So you would go to it wanting to know if Pritchett has anything to say on Anna Karenina, and you would find that in the index, and then find the piece. And eventually, if the book is good enough, if the author is one you keep returning to over and over again, you will have read the whole thing simply because the author keeps bringing you back. That certainly happened to me with this. And if it's happened with Pritchett, it's happened 10 times more with this next example, which is United States by Gore Vidal. This is his great collection of a lifetime of literary pieces for the TLS and the New York Review of Books and anywhere else that would pay him on social issues, political issues, and the best third of the book, literary issues. This is a Bible. Any literary person, especially in the literary profession, will share that opinion. There isn't anyone who doesn't venerate this book and who doesn't go back to it over and over again, even when they know it very well. I know this very well. I know some people know it better than I do, and it never fails. It never fails. To instruct and to delight, it never fails. But it is still a pick and choose type thing. You probably wouldn't, nor is it designed for you, to just start on page 1 and read to, what is the magic number? 1,094. 1,294. You'd very seldom be compelled to do that, I think. Whereas the last one of the 5 that I want to show you actually does benefit from reading chronologically, because the author builds steam. He wrote it that way. He didn't write it in segments. And it builds coherence as it goes along. And it is also the longest book ever written. And I've shown it on this channel before. It's Reclaiming History by Vincent Bugliosi, which is, let's have a drum roll please, 1,612 pages long, and comes with a disc in the back which includes another 2,500 pages of notes, or 1,700 pages of notes depending on how you print them out. And they aren't just citations, Newsweek, 1971. They're whole essays, and sometimes pages and pages of essays, elaborating small points in which Bugliosi defends the Warren Commission's account of what happened at the assassination of President Kennedy, and goes through every single assassination theory and book, piece by piece, argument by argument, swatting them all down. And that takes a lot of time. And he spends that time. So this is one of the ultimate books on the subject, perhaps the ultimate book. And also very good reading. I don't know if any of you have read Bugliosi, Helter Skelter, for instance, on the Manson family, but he's a very good writer. And I don't know how he didn't die of exhaustion, but he didn't. So there you go. And then the next part of the tag is to name two large books that you haven't got to yet. And I actually couldn't find two in my collection that I just flat out haven't read yet. I found one that I haven't read yet. With all due apologies to Olive at a book column. It's this thing. It's Douglas Smith's gigantic biography of Rasputin, which comes out to almost 800 pages. And I got this ARC a long time ago, and I haven't read it. I just haven't prioritized it. I'm afraid this guy just doesn't interest me the way he seems to interest every horror and science fiction writer who's ever lived. But I will do it. I will get to this. This comes out in middle of November. I will certainly get to it before then. And then the next one is one that I have read, but I'm going to reread it. I found it at the Brattle, for $1, and it's this. It's the Collected Stories of William Trevor, an Irish writer. I read this collection when it first came out, actually front to back, and thought it was as flat as a pancake. But lots of people whose literary opinions I respect love this book, and they love this author. None of them has ever suggested to me that I try his novels, which I think is pretty telling. So it must be that it must be in his short stories that his genius lies, and here's a gigantic collection of them. I found it, I viewed it as a sign from above. So it's not one that I haven't got around to yet, but I am going to read it again before the end of the year, and I'm going to do it front to back, just to see what I've been missing, because I think it's clear I've been missing something. And there you go. That is the Big Books tag. I wasn't tagged by anybody, and I'm not sure if a tag from me would work, because BookTube in general seems to shy away from 1,200-page books, as most sane people do. But I'll see you soon with something else, and I'll tag you all in. Thank you, BookTube.